Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to see you here early. I'm going to share just a few announcements before we get started with our presentation at the top of the hour. I want to remind you that our last webinar was on May 2nd with Dr. Dina Rose. She was presenting on how nutrition professionals can help families end overeating and undo this obesity cycle that we find ourselves in. So I hope you'll check it out. James has it posted to our webinar now. Archives on our website. So it'll be there, and there's a lot of other ones you can check out while you're there. And Dr. Rose was generous in offering one of her books. It's not all about broccoli. So Andrea Hill was the winner of our drawing. And I talked to Dr. Rose today, Andrea, and she is getting that in the mail right away. So there's a gift and a prize, and with little wings coming to you. I hope you enjoy it. Let us know what you think. Also, our All About Alumni series. I don't know if you've had a chance to check it out yet. I'm really super excited about this. This is an online event where we really showcase Hawthorn graduates. It's an interview-style presentation. We present these on the first Wednesday of each month at noon Pacific time. It's just fantastic to hear about what our graduates are doing. They talk about their successes. They really talk about the challenges that they face and how they've overcome them. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing, the journey that many of our graduates are taking. So I hope you'll tune in with that. Karen Roth is our next presenter on June 7th. She's an MSHN graduate. And as usual, these All About Alumni and these Tuesday webinars are always recorded. We'll record this one as well, and you'll have access to them from our website under archive webinars. And this one will be up with Dr. Lipski in just a few days. And a reminder that there'll be a survey for you to complete after the webinar ends. It's an opportunity for you to give us your feedback on the presentation and to let us know about what you'd like to learn more about in upcoming webinars. And so this is a moment just before we start the presentation, in a reminder of the value of the National Association of Nutrition Professionals organization. It's the only holistic nutrition professional organization in the country, I think in the world. And they just had the annual conference. It was May 4th to 7th, and it was in Portland, Oregon this year. And the focus was blazing trails in holistic nutrition. For those of you that didn't attend, they've got recordings of all the presentations, so those will be available. For those that you did attend, I'd like to hear from you and how it was for you and how many other Hawthorn people that you got to see. And for those that aren't aware, NAMP offers a credentialing board exam. So you can become board certified in holistic nutrition by being a member of NAMP and taking this exam after you graduate from one of Hawthorn's approved programs. Many of our graduates have already gone on and have this additional credential behind their name and find it of great value. So check that out and see what it might mean for you. I think that's it for announcements, except for one little bit more. I'm going to start sharing the announcements after the presentation ends from now on. So starting in June, we'll do it that way. So sometimes we'll have little interviews with the presenter before, but we'll announce that with the webinar announcement as it goes out. And otherwise, we'll just tune in together at 4 o'clock Pacific time and get right started into the presentation with our fabulous question and answer period afterwards. That's sometimes one of the most dynamic parts of the presentation, where you get to really interact with a presenter live. You don't get this opportunity in very many places to have access to the quality of health professionals that we bring on here and in our Tuesday webinar series, and to be able to engage in commentary, to present your comments and your questions and have dialogue, I think is a beautiful thing. So take advantage of that. And I'm ready to start the presentation. I'm really excited to have Dr. Liz Lipski back. Hi, Dr. Lipski.
Hi, Paula. I love that you were talking about NANP. I was at the conference, and it's so fantastic to hear the speakers, to see the enthusiasm of all the the nutrition professionals who are there to see the camaraderie. And also, it's so important to have really a professional home. And NENP is a really wonderful professional home where at least once a year you get to hang out with people who are just like you and are working on building their practices or working with physicians or wherever they're working. And it's really a wonderful time to build community and come together. So I hope that you'll all go there.
Thank you for that, Liz. It's really like showing up and being with your tribe. You know, you immediately walk in, you feel like family because, you know, people are on the same page. They're aligned with the same values and principles, and they're aiming to achieve very similar goals for themselves and in their businesses. So it's a rich place.
And also the exam, I took it a long time ago. It's a really good exam. It gives you a national board certification in nutrition, and it's just one more feather in your cap and makes you have just one more credential that's very useful to have. So good to have initials after your name.
Absolutely. So put your webcam on, Liz, so we can see you. I'm looking at the slide that's up right now. You've got PhD after, but you know you've got a half a page otherwise. Additional credentials.
I just keep collecting them. When James gives me the screen, then I'll do that. Okay. So here we go.
All right. I'm going to go forward with introductions then. Are you ready?
I hope. Are you saying the right screen?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a thing of beauty.
Perfect. Okay.
All right, everybody. Hello, I'm Paula. I'm glad that you're here already, and I want to welcome you to Hawthorn University's webinar series, and thanks for joining in. It's my pleasure to be the moderator, and I'll let you know we'll save time at the end of this presentation for your questions. So at any point, just add your questions and your comments to the webinar panel, and I'll pose them for each of you after Liz's presentation. And also a reminder to keep your eyes on the webinar chat panel too, because Alex posts details there all the time, so you don't need to write certain things down like URLs. And anyway, it's a good place to keep your eyes on. So today, Hawthorn University welcomes back Dr. Liz Lipski to present on diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome, and the microbiome. And in this webinar, Dr. You are a whiz, Dr. Liz. I'll just leave it at that. So Dr. Liz is going to share new research on the gut microbiome, indicating that the key to blood sugar, cardiovascular health, and weight management just may begin in the gut. So today we're going to explore more about the relationship between the gut barrier function and obesity, metabolic syndrome, and diabetes. And we'll look at current research and consider how changing what we eat can heal the gut barrier function and balance the microbiota in order to shift metabolism towards a healthy weight and reductions in diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Dr. Lipski holds a PhD in clinical nutrition and has a specialization in integrative medicine. She was formerly the education director here at Hawthorn University and the initial designer of the Doctor of Science in Holistic Nutrition program at Hawthorn. She's currently the professor and director of academic development for the graduate programs in Nutrition and Integrative Health at Maryland University of Integrative Health. And she's on the faculty for the Institute of Functional Medicine, Metabolic Medicine Institute Fellowship Program. She sits on Scientific Advisory Board of the Neurological Health Foundation and advisory boards for Certified International Health Coaches and the Autism Hope Alliance.
Thanks, Paula.
You bet.
It's so fun to play with you always, and I'm so glad to be here at Hawthorn again, which is, one of my homes where I feel like I'm home. So welcome, everybody, and thanks for taking time out of your busy lives to join me today. Paula did a great introduction, and I'm hoping my webinar will be, my webcam will be okay. Every once in a while it crashes my computer, so I'm probably going to close it in a couple minutes, but I did want to say hello. So
thank you, Dr. Liz. If you have any concern, you click off when you think so. But it's very nice to be able to see you as you're sharing your information. Thank you.
Thanks. Um, so as Paula was saying, we're starting to get new research in this area, and I'm going to present some of the research, and then we're going to talk about food approaches to all of this, and then we'll open up for questions. So the gut microbiome is now recognized as a key driver of inter-individual variation in the likelihood of developing obesity and diabetes. Recently, I met a man who is huge, grossly obese, and my first thought was, I wonder what's going on with his metabolism. I wonder what's going on with his microbiome. Rather than starting to wonder, like, what's he eating and is he exercising and the normal things that we usually kind of think about. We all know people who are very thin who eat a lot of food. In fact, I was talking to somebody just this weekend, and she was saying, I can out eat my husband and I never gain any weight and I'm hungry all the time. We know people like that. And I also know people, as you do, who are overweight or obese, who eat very little and it's difficult for them to lose weight. And the cycle when you need to lose 30, 50, 100 pounds is a very difficult one because it's a prolonged battle and sometimes it's not easy to do. So today I want to kind of walk through some of the research and really show you how this works and why it's so important and why we need to have really a paradigm shift in thinking about people who are obese. We know that the programs for people who are obese don't work. Um, they work, people lose weight, and then people rebound and gain the weight. And that's true in about 80% of the people on these programs. So, what drives obesity and metabolic syndrome and diabetes? So, first of all, let's define metabolic syndrome. Probably all of you know this, but just want to make sure. So, metabolic syndrome is a constellation of symptoms or signs. One is obesity, another is high triglycerides or cholesterol, and uh, uh, hip waist ratio, BMI being off, and also blood sugar rising. And so when you start looking at a constellation of somebody who has several of those symptoms, they get termed with metabolic syndrome. So we know the food that we eat is different. A lot of people don't get enough exercise. Movement is not optional. Stress, I don't know anybody really who's not under stress or feel like they're stressed. Um, Medications. So we know that, for example, there are a lot of medications that people take that tend to make them fat and also raise serum lipids and adversely throw them into diabetes. Also, we've got a huge amount of research on how environmental toxins drive metabolic syndrome, drive diabetes, drive obesity, drive polycystic ovarian syndrome. And you can just start seeing that all these chemicals really change. And I know you've had a lot of webinars on that. Also, circadian cycle disruptions. So, people who are shift workers, people who are night owls and don't get enough sleep. And then finally, the disrupted microbiome. So, in the small amount of time that we have today, we don't have time to go into all of these in great detail. We're going to focus on the last bullet. So, one of the first things that I wanted to just kind of walk into is I want to talk about NAFLD. This is also known as non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or just fatty liver. And it's really the liver, the way that the liver tells us that we have metabolic syndrome. And you can see fatty liver in testing where you see elevated liver enzymes. Um, and also, if somebody's doing surgery, it actually looks fatty. We all know kind of what fatty meat looks like, and this would be fatty meat. And it's correlated with obesity and insulin resistance and also with type 2 diabetes. And so as many as 70% of people with type 2 diabetes have fatty liver. And so fatty liver is one of those slippery slides that takes us into developing diabetes, just as metabolic syndrome does. So what does fatty liver look like? And this is just kind of a slide to show you. All of those white places in this are the fat in the liver. And when your liver has at least 10% or more, 20% fat, then it starts looking like this, and it can get riddled with fat, almost like sometimes when you look at a piece of sausage or something or salami and it's got all these fat globules. Well, that's what fatty liver looks like. And there's a progression that happens. So we start out with fatty liver at the bottom, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And you know, the only difference between non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and alcoholic fatty liver disease is alcohol. They look just the same. But non-alcoholic means somebody isn't drinking too much, but maybe it's drugs or chemicals or diet or something else. And then that leads to obesity and insulin resistance, which um, starts making your cholesterol, your particle size, your triglycerides start going up, and then your body gets better and better at kind of using all the energy that you take in, and then finally you have a gut dysbiosis. This pyramid goes both ways. And what I'm going to try to show you is that the gut dysbiosis drives a lot of this. So chicken or egg? Is it the gut that makes us fat and have diabetes, or is it the diabetes and being fat makes us have gut dysbiosis? And I think it works really both ways. A couple of years ago in the summer, I had the opportunity to go to Harvard to a diet and microbiota in health and disease workshop and heard Dr. Lee Kaplan, who's a researcher there. And what he says is gaining 20 pounds between the ages of 21 to 65 is the difference between 4 to 5 calories a day, or less than half of a potato chip. No one has that much willpower. When he said it, this really went into my being. It's like, wow, you know, we always think that dieting is about willpower. And I think most of us on the call, I think that you know that changing your diet, changing your lifestyle has a lot more to do with whether you'll lose weight or not than, you know, the willpower. Because I know a lot of people with a lot of willpower who've tried to lose weight and they lose the weight and then the weight bounces right back. So what he says is really the answer to this is in the microbiota. And we know when we look at thin people and we compare them to fat people, that fat people have more of what we call phylum of microbes, firmicutes, that their firmicutes are elevated and their bacteroides are actually lower and than people who are thin. And when people who are heavy lose weight, this starts normalizing. Now, before we throw out and say, well, firmicutes are bad, bacteroides good, the truth is that in the firmicute family is all of our lactobacilli. And so there are thousands and thousands of different microbes in this family called firmicutes. And researchers are now kind of combing through all of that and saying, well, which one of these actually contribute to obesity? And is there something that we could do? So, you know, just because there's a rotten egg in a family doesn't mean the whole family is a bad family. And this family is actually a pretty good family. So here's another kind of more technical looking at the gut microbiota. And again, you can see that there's in non-obese people, the firmicutes are um, kind of about equal, but the bacteroides are a lot higher, and that there's just kind of differences in how this all looks. And we know that this is true in also people with Alzheimer's and children with autism, and that every kind of disease constellation really shows up a different kind of microbiota constellation. We're very early into this research, and basically what we're going to find out, and what we're finding out, is that each person is different, and that what may be true in general may not be true for one person specifically. And so, I'm a big believer in learning about all the research, but then doing really common sense things when I'm working with somebody, like listening to them and working on diet and lifestyle to actually bring them back in a balance. And we don't necessarily have to even know about all these details that researchers need to know about, because they happen automatically, that the balance occurs. Now, one of the first ways that people actually realized that the microbiome had a really big effect on weight loss was they started looking at men and women who'd had gastric bypass surgery for obesity, and Roux-en-Y, or vertical banded gastroplasty. And what they saw was there are really long-term alterations in the balance of the microbiome, but these changes start happening sometimes within 3 or 4 days after the surgery, that people who are diabetic, who needed medication or maybe insulin, that they no longer are diabetic. And that happens immediately, way before they've started really losing any weight. And so they start looking at that and going, well, what's the mechanism of this? We don't really understand. And in no way am I endorsing these surgeries, because what I do know is that the long-term effects of both of these kinds of surgeries, more with the Roux-en-Y than the bands, um, but the implications is that people end up malnourished and have a lot more health issues after they've had gastric bypass surgeries than maybe they would have if they had just really dug into diet and lifestyle. I'm lucky enough to have worked with somebody who came to see me who wanted to lose weight. She needed to lose 25 pounds before they would consider her for the surgery. And she was able to lose over 100 pounds, and she never needed the surgery. And so, just kind of looking at some of these other pieces might be helpful. Okay, I am going to get rid of my camera. So anyway, why don't we open up for questions while this is going, if there are any so far. Paula, do we have any questions?
Well, one thing that I wondered, Liz, was about fatty liver. And I think about fats in this day and age and how they hold toxins. And that when I think about, female reproductive organs, that's where females are showing up with their cancers and more chronic diseases. And I wonder if you have thoughts on that, of just the fattiness of the liver itself and how that might be contributing to the overall disease pattern that's being affected in fatty liver, whether it's alcohol related or not.
Yeah, the liver, as we know, it's the body's filtering system, and it's so important for ridding us of toxins. And when it's loaded with fat, it can't do that. And also it makes bile, and the bile is a very important mechanism for how we actually get rid of hormones that we don't want to use, that we don't need anymore, because the hormones are because we finished them, and so the liver actually breaks them down, and dumps, and the bile escorts them um, into our intestines so that we can poop it out. And so, when the liver function is compromised, it opens us up greatly to more and more toxins and more hormones that never get decomposed or broken down. And so it's really an issue. Now let's see if it'll connect me directly to go to webinar. I'm just going to kind of come back in here and log back in. So, and Heidi Snyder, who is one of the graduates of Hawthorn, one of the first graduates, um, she actually wrote her thesis on the effect of toxins when people are dieting. Because when people diet, then all these toxins start dumping out of the fatty tissues all the way through the body. So just kind of an interesting aside there. So anyway, so here's a research study that actually shows this, that you've got, and they're women, they could be men, but here's somebody who's obese, and what they've done is harvested this person's microbiota. They've taken stool from her and given it to germ-free mouse, and mice eat poop, which makes them really disgusting, but also really helps us in research. And from eating her poop, the mouse got really obese, but after these other people, who happen to be women in this picture, when their poop was given to germ-free mice to eat, the mice stayed thin. And we know from other research that that this happens over and over. So as we start looking, again, this all starts, if you look in the middle, when we're babies and we're born, if we're breastfed, we start getting tremendous amounts of prebiotic in the breast milk itself, and sugars. If you've ever tasted breast milk, it's very sweet. And that starts setting up the microbiome in infancy. And we'll talk more about that later. And lean people have more of certain microbes. Heavy people have more of other microbes. And this is all affected by antibiotics and probiotics and prebiotics. And the best place to get our probiotics and prebiotics is typically from food. So as I said before, when we diet, the microbiome actually changes. So here's on the right side of the screen, here's lean people, and and the blue bars are the firmicutes, and the red bars are the bacteroidetes. And you can see that one of which is bacteroides, and you can see that over time, as people lose weight, that their balance starts normalizing. And I had talked about that before. And then if we start looking in again, we're starting to get a body of research that indicates really that leaky gut, which is increased intestinal permeability, drives this whole process. And this is really the chicken and egg point, where you start really looking at this and going, wow, because what they know is when people have leaky gut, that what happens is that we have, whether we have gluten sensitivity or celiac disease or not, there are certain microbes that are mostly gram-negative, and they produce something called lipopolysaccharides. And this isn't kind of like the lipopolysaccharides we find in fatty food or the lipopolysaccharides we find in our cell membranes. These are inflammatory. And so these lipopolysaccharides start an inflammatory process that actually increases leaky gut. And so the changes in the microbiome start driving inflammation, start driving toxicity, which we call endotoxemia, and starts opening the spaces between the cells of the epithelial layer of the gut and starts letting in microbes, chemicals, toxins, food molecules that are way too big. And this is kind of the genesis of really autoimmune conditions. According to all the research that's been done on autoimmune, leaky gut is one of the preconditions that has to be there in order for somebody to develop an autoimmune. This round robin of more and more inflammation, decreased insulin sensitivity, which leads to gut permeability, and it's round and round and round. And here's another pictogram just kind of displaying the same thing in a lot more detail. So you can see on the left is the healthy gut microbiota. And you're going to have all these slides. So my point is not going to be to like read you everything that's on a slide, but to really just kind of look at some of the keys, and then you can look at them later. What we do know that high fat and high sugar diets and stress and antibiotics drive us to a disordered gut microbiota, which drives us into obesity and diabetes. And the work that we all do in working with people to kind of help them change their lifestyle and their food improves gut and metabolic health. And again, another pictogram saying the same thing. And what we know too is that sometimes a high-fat diet will increase the lipopolysaccharide, we call LPS, and bacterial load. And honestly, I have not seen any research yet that is on good quality fats, a good quality high-fat diet. We just don't have it because that's not what most people who are eating a high-fat diet are eating. So again, obesity causes low-grade inflammation throughout the body. And what they've found is that a high-fat diet, and they're giving people, I have to say, kind of crummy quality fats, but increased lipopolysaccharide in 4 weeks and also increased weight and BMI in mice. So, the kind of fats that they feed mice are usually restructured. They're very refined. They're not a whole foods kind of diet in any way. And so they also found that there was an increase in fatty liver disease in these mice and increased insulin resistance. So we're starting to see again more and more research that says that this is going on. And then this is a human study where they looked at almost 2,500 people and they followed them for 10 years. And they said, yeah, this increases in lipopolysaccharides are consistent with all the things that I just mentioned, plus cardiovascular events like heart attack and stroke. And they said, what they also found that C-reactive protein levels were elevated, but it didn't really matter like how many calories people ate or if they were obese or had metabolic syndrome or not. It was really the lipopolysaccharides that were driving the process. So this is kind of where the rubber meets the road, and like leaky gut is the place that drives all of this. So this is a picture of a butterfly eating poop. And we as humans are kind of appalled by this, and we don't tend to eat poop. But we do have some indication and some research that eating poop might actually help us be thinner. So they took 2 identical twins, and one was morbidly obese, and the other one was lean. And what they did was the same thing that they had done with the rats in the Roux-en-Y and gastric banding, is they actually took germ-free mice and they gave stool pellets from the obese twin and from the lean twin to these mice. And the one that got the obese twins poop was fat, and the ones that got the lean twins poop stayed lean. And then they did kind of a crossover, which was very interesting. And they put them on a low-fat diet or a low-fat, high-fiber diet, and they didn't really see a lot of change. But when they did a high-fat, low-fiber diet, they started seeing that if you fed poop from a thin mouse to a fat one, that you started getting that they would thin down. And when you started giving poop from a fat mouse to a thin mouse, they started getting fat. And so we started to see that there's something really going on here. Um, so so here's the chow consumption and a little bit more in this that you can go in more detail. So interestingly enough, we see this kind of playing out a little bit negatively in a human, and I wanted to point this out because you can look at YouTube videos that are showing you how to do fecal transplants in your own backyard, with your own blender that you buy for that purpose. And I'm not suggesting that you find your skinny friend and um, give yourself an enema with their poop, but one of the things that the fecal transplant is well documented for and will cure almost everybody who gets one of is a recurrent Clostridium difficile infection. And this is the treatment of choice for people who can't get rid of it with antibiotics. And so basically there was a woman who had recurrent C. diff. Her weight was stable, as was her BMI at 136 pounds and 26 BMI percent. And her 16-year-old daughter was going to be the stool donor. They'll often use family members. And but they found that she had some H. pylori, so they gave her antibiotics and bismuth. And afterwards, what was so fascinating was both the mom and the daughter gained huge amounts of weight, and both of them, their weight went up to over 170 pounds. And the mom, they put on a supervised medical fast, and she still couldn't lose the weight, and her weight kept going up and up and up. We know that antibiotics increase weight. We give antibiotics to animals that we're going to eat to fatten them up. And this is actually an experiment where we did that with a person. And so when people aren't using organic meat, organic dairy products, pasture-raised eggs that are organic, what we all get is little bits of antibiotics. And are they making us fat? I would say yes, they are. So if you take probiotics and prebiotics and you add them together, you get something called symbiotics. And we're starting to see some research about the relationship of adding prebiotics, and where we find prebiotics, and I have a slide that's coming up on this in just a minute, is in foods that are loaded with what we consider to be soluble fiber. So think oatmeal, think legumes, think fruits and vegetables, think artichokes, think some of your grains, think asparagus. There's soluble fiber in all of these: chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp seeds. And the soluble fiber actually gets broken down and used. And it changes our insulin sensitivity and our leptin sensitivity as well. And so this combination of the prebiotics, which act as food for the probiotics, are very, very useful. And this slide really shows this. We also see, again, in many studies that high-fat diets increase this endotoxemia, which is also called increased intestinal permeability, also called leaky gut. High sugar diets do the same, and also high calorie diets do the same. Now, a group of my students at Maryland University of Integrative Health handed me a group project, and we've been publishing this. And in fact, Paula, I will send you a copy of this so that you can post it as well. We've been publishing a series of papers, and this one is about all the different probiotic products and probiotics in foods that have been reported to be beneficial for cardiometabolic disease. So I will send this paper, and you can all have a copy of it. And this is what some of the charts look like that are in the paper. So they looked at the research, they looked at the specific probiotics that were used, and then they went on to a short overview and went to look for if there are any products on the market that contain these, and then what foods might contain these. So very useful on a lot of different levels. And we're starting to see human studies on this. So they found that prebiotics will lower fasting and postprandial, that's right after you eat, glucose levels, and also improved insulin sensitivity and lipid profiles. So this is what we're really looking to do. And they stimulated the production of GLP-1, which is a hormone that helps regulate metabolism. And then probiotics, we've seen small yet significant changes in people's ability to lose weight, and especially with fermented milk products. So think kefir and yogurt and cheeses. So, again, hooray for food. And then pickled and fermented foods, particularly vegetables, could serve as dietary sources of pre, pro, and symbiotics. So fermented and cultured foods are really where we're going to see the biggest bang for our buck, and that's right in our wheelhouse. So here's another research study on symbiotics, and they gave the people either a placebo or 2 probiotic capsules daily for 12 weeks that had 12 billion colony-forming units twice daily. So they got 40 billion colony-forming units of a combination probiotic, and they found lowered blood pressure, increased weight loss. The placebo group also started losing weight, but they stopped at 6 weeks, whereas the other group, they kept losing weight all the way through 12 weeks and beyond. And then here's a trial of using symbiotics in type 2 diabetes in 60 people. And again, you can see the same kind of results. And this was with a much smaller level of probiotic and prebiotic, just 2 billion colony-forming units daily, plus a little bit of inulin. So again, we can see kind of tremendous changes when people do this. And then we've also gotten at least one report on symbiotics and weight loss in children, and seeing the same kind of results. And again, lactobacillus rhamnosus is one of these, and this is at 1.6 100 million, so doesn't that make that a billion colony-forming units, plus oligofructose, which is a prebiotic, and inulin, and for 24 weeks. And they did dietary restriction in both groups for the first 12 weeks, and the biggest weight loss was at 24 weeks, and most in women, which is great because it seems to be easier for men to lose weight in general. And they said men lost weight on calorie restriction in both groups, but the probiotic and prebiotic, L. rhamnosus, was more effective in women. And then there's meta-analyses that indicate that, again, probiotics are beneficial in type 2 diabetes. So which probiotics help with weight loss? Here's some of the many that have been looked at so far. And what I want to say about this is like the goose that laid the golden egg. When we really have a probiotic supplement or can make a probiotic yogurt that is loaded with just the right probiotics and prebiotics to help people lose weight, there's going to be a mad scramble, because that company who makes these is going to be worth a lot of money if it can be patented. And so there's a big race on, and I'm hoping that soon we'll have it so that everybody doesn't need to go and have fecal transplants, but can just eat pro and prebiotic rich foods, or take some kind of probiotic patented capsules and lose weight. It would be way more easy to do. And then this is from a recent study, and I found it pretty interesting. And basically, metformin is a drug that's used in diabetes. And in this, it was with mice, but metformin is given in pretty big doses. It's given in gram doses, so over 1,000 milligrams or 2,000 milligrams daily. And what they found was that metformin changed the composition of the gut microbiome, eating a high-fat diet and improved blood sugar handling. And they concluded that metformin, the probable mechanism for why it works so well in people with diabetes is that it's actually a prebiotic, that it's changing the microbiome. So, really, prevention is key for diabetes. And, you want to look at kind of all these pieces of it to say, well, what's driving somebody's metabolic syndrome? What's driving somebody's obesity? And the first place we want to start is in with our babies. And this is just kind of a shameless possibility for me to show my 3-week-old granddaughter, who's now crawling and curious and doing other things. But basically, this all gets set up. The baby's microbiome gets set up in the first 2 to 3 years of life. And it's the mother's health, whether the baby's born by C-section or born vaginally, whether where the mom lives on the planet determines like what soil she's exposed to, what foods, how many antibiotics, how much stress she has, which determines her own microbiome. Um, Smoke, when babies are exposed to smoke in the womb and after they're born, that affects their microbiome. And then breastfeeding, of course, is best. And then babies that have pets in the home or babies who live on farms have a much more robust microbiome. So we want to do everything that we can do to help with that because we see that in babies who are exposed to antibiotics during pregnancy nearly double their risk of obesity. And when they're given antibiotics in infancy and early childhood, they have an increased risk of obesity, diabetes, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, um, and many other chronic health conditions. And so, this is something, it's like, yes, if your baby has to be on antibiotics, well, that's fine, but then try to make sure that you're putting your baby in exposure where they're getting prebiotics during those antibiotics, where they're getting pro and prebiotics afterwards, giving them homemade sauerkraut juice to drink or bubbies, and really little kids like sour things. So it's an easy way to kind of repopulate them. The more often we've got research in ulcerative colitis that the more often toddlers and babies are given antibiotics, the higher these risks go. So how do we really change the microbiome? Well, diet has the most powerful influence on the gut microbial communities. And as we know, like 75% of the food that people eat on a standard Western diet is actually dead food. It's the life in food that gives us life. And so when we encourage people to eat real food, we can change their microbiota. And as I said before, I like diving into the research. It's good to know about it, but mostly what we need to do is what we do because we can really help people change. So one of the things I started thinking about in my mind was that when we give people a diet for diabetes, what do? We actually regulate the types of carbohydrates that they eat. And when somebody comes in with GI issues, what do we do with them? We regulate the types of carbohydrates they eat. So you can think about the gut and psychology syndrome diet or specific carbohydrate diet or the FODMAP diet. And basically what we do is we really change somebody's microbiome. We heard that metformin is actually a prebiotic. What if it's not the low carbohydrate in itself that makes the difference? What if it's actually the quality of the carbohydrate? So James Anderson was a researcher, may still be a researcher at the University of Kentucky, and he started putting people and published a lot of research about putting people on high complex carbohydrate diets, 40 to 60 grams of fiber daily with huge whopping servings of legumes and vegetables and fruits and whole grains. And lo and behold, people responded just as well to that as they did to carbohydrate counting, which is what's usually done. And so, this is my hypothesis that the reason why these diets actually work is because they're changing the microbiome. So, prebiotic rich foods. Here's a long list of them. And one of the things that I love is that basically you could have black or green tea, which are fermented, and add some honey to it. Honey is a prebiotic, and the tea is loaded with probiotics and some prebiotics. And you just made yourself a prebiotic and probiotic symbiotic rich tea. Um, so, at jicama, I just love jicama. It's sweet, it's good for us, it's low in calories. Same with things like radishes that are also help with bile. Um, all of these things are very helpful. As are mushrooms. Mushrooms are loaded with prebiotics and beta glucans, and we know that they're immune boosting. And part of that benefit is because they're loaded with soluble fiber. Soluble fiber, prebiotic, modified resistant starch. These are all synonyms for the same thing. I'm going to say that again because you hear them over and over from different people in different ways. Resistant starch, prebiotic, and soluble fibers are all really the same thing. And so here's something that when we eat dietary polyphenols, which we find in colorful foods, right? Eat a rainbow. What you can see is that it has a huge effect on the gut microbiome. And again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but what we know about the polyphenols is that the polyphenols are actually probiotics, prebiotics. They get gobbled up by lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, and it activates them and other commensals that are in the colon, and it activates and feeds the probiotics. It breaks down the colors, the polyphenols, and the plant bioactives. It breaks them down so that they can start being utilized. And the breakdown products create short chain fatty acids, and those short chain fatty acids are the main energy source for the colon for energy maintenance and repair. So when we eat a rainbow, we feed the good microbiome and we feed our colon. Herbs and spices, my recommendation is, adding these to our meals. We know that spices stimulate enzyme reactions. They increase pancreatic amylase and lipase activity. They help us break down sugars like lactase and sucrase and maltase. And these are very beneficial. This research came from Indian research. So they're looking at more of kind of the Eastern Indian herbs and spices. Yet my guess is that basil and oregano and fennel and all the things, and caraway, all the things that we use in more Western cooking and European cooking also do the same thing. So we also have probiotic rich foods. And, again, at Hawthorn, you learn a lot about these foods. One of the things I'd like to say is like miso. Miso has over 150 different strains of microbes in it. Honey, fresh local honey, has been shown to have over 12 different strains of lactobacilli and bifidobacteria at doses of about 4 to 5 colony billion colony forming units per teaspoon. So, we start thinking about this, and even a miso soup that's been boiled at a Japanese restaurant, you still get huge benefits because from Japanese research, we know that even dead probiotics modulate the immune system. So just a couple of little slides here. So yogurt has been shown to decrease diabetes risk and obesity risk. And there's many studies here. I just kind of took down 5, but I could have gone on and on. And so the dietary takeaways for everybody are not going to be a surprise to anybody on the call. Eat a whole foods diet high in fruits and vegetables and fruit. Eat a diet that regulates glycemic control. So eat high quality fats. Remove all restructured fats and oils from your diet. Avoid processed sugars and high fructose corn syrup, which we know drive metabolic syndrome and also drive fatty liver. Add high prebiotic and probiotic rich foods. Eat more legumes, mushrooms, root vegetables, flax, chia, sea vegetables, hemp seeds, algae, and eat more fermented dairy products like yogurt and kefir, and you can also eat non-dairy fermented yogurts and kefirs like cashew coconut kefir or soy yogurt. It doesn't have to be from dairy. So additional considerations is look for infection, refer to a physician and make sure that there isn't something going on. Look for undiagnosed celiac disease as a cause of the increased lipopolysaccharide, and then provide support, supplemental support for healing of the leaky gut, and whether that's recommending that somebody drinks aloe vera every day or takes L-glutamine or colostrum, which has very little lactose in it, so it's pretty good for people who are lactose intolerant, but not good for somebody who has a casein allergy. And then demulcents such as marshmallow root, slippery elm, DGL licorice, but also eating demulcent foods like okra. Slippery, good for you. Bone broth, which I know you know about. Zinc, especially zinc carnosine, has been shown very beneficial. Quercetin helps heal leaky gut. And vitamin A is something that we're often afraid to use, but real preformed vitamin A helps heal the gut mucosa. So using doses of 10 to 30,000 units daily for a month is completely safe for nearly every single person. In fact, at NANP a few years ago, I did a whole 90-minute lecture on vitamin A. We really don't need to be so afraid of it. There are also a lot of supplements that are made by pretty much every company that combine a lot of these ingredients, plus an acetylglucosamine to make a leaky gut support products. So we talked about the things that kind of drive metabolic syndrome. I focused really on the disrupted microbiome, and that's pretty much what I wanted to tell you. And now we can open up for Q&A.
Thank you, Liz, so much. And yeah, we've got some good questions here. Thanks for this presentation. It stimulated a lot of thought, I can tell. The slides on the. So there was a gastro bypass that was done, and if I heard it correctly, then they were no longer diabetic after the bypass.
Yes.
Even though during the surgery they must have had antibiotics.
Yes. So
interesting, huh?
It is interesting, and so then you look at that too and you go, well, did they have an infection maybe that was also driving what was going on? Because you'll see that people right after the surgery, within a really short amount of time, they don't need their diabetic medications. And so is it that the microbiome changed because they had an infection and got antibiotics? Is it that the microbiome just changes so dramatically when you bypass the common bile duct, which seems like a really crazy thing to do? But yeah, pretty interesting. I haven't seen direct research on whether it's the antibiotics that they give during surgery make the difference, though. But great question. I love that.
That makes me think of rheumatoid arthritis and the theory that it can be bacterial driven. And, a primary treatment for it now is using antibiotics to manage the pain. And interesting with rheumatoid arthritis, it's a chronic condition, but I don't see people resolving the RA from taking the antibiotics, even though they're taking it long term? Ebony, I'm off topic here in terms of the gut, but just translating it. Do you have a comment on that?
I do. It's like taking rheumatoid arthritis is just one example of one autoimmune condition. So for rheumatoid arthritis, there's at least 20 known bacteria and viruses that are the underlying trigger. For an autoimmune condition to really take hold, you need three things. You need the right genetic predisposition, you need a leaky gut, and you need a trigger. And in many cases, a virus or a bacteria will be a trigger. So, for example, in type 1 diabetes, often you'll have somebody who's feeling fine, they get the flu, and the next thing they know, they're type 1 diabetic. And we see this in all of the autoimmune diseases. Even some cancers have been linked to bacteria and viral infections. And so, not all of them by any means, but it's a fascinating kind of look at all of this. And then you go, well, the virus was, or the bacteria was a trigger, but once that process is turned on, the immune system has just kind of gone haywire, and it starts being on super alert. So whereas maybe taking low dose antibiotics long term for rheumatoid arthritis might kind of lower that, I've seen also really great results in changing diet, putting people on elimination diets or FODMAP or GAPS diets, or because all of that also modulates. And the goal is, it's like now, instead of being a switch that's like on and off, now you have it on a dimmer switch. So it's always on, but how low can you turn that dimmer switch so the disease turns off? And, so in some people, it might be a miracle. And, long-term antibiotics, wow. I think we really need to, again, while we're doing that, load people with really good food and really good cultured and fermented foods, and even high dose probiotics if we're going to, use antibiotics long term.
All right, great explanation. Thanks. And then the question about the fecal transplant case study for the C. diff woman. The fecal transplant was suggested because she had C. diff, right?
Correct.
It's the only condition that
go away.
And it's the only condition that is acknowledged for using fecal transplant in this country. Is that still correct?
It is, yet right now there's ongoing research. So, for example, fecal transplant isn't new. It's been around for thousands of years. And when I mentioned it to a colleague who's now retired, who's a gastroenterologist, he goes, "Oh yeah, we were doing that in the 1930s and 40s." But there's a researcher named Tom Barodi in Australia, and he has over the last 30 years been doing fecal transplants, and his work with C. diff was what really spread all over the world, so that now it's, we've got teaching hospitals all over the country who are using it for C. diff. That said, they're also starting to do research on ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, and what they're finding is, again, like Tom Barodi, that about half of the people who have ulcerative colitis and Crohn's actually get cured after 1 to 3 or 4 fecal transplants. And so it's like, well, maybe it's only half of the people, but for those people, they're 100% cured.
Right.
And, so that's a big deal. There are researchers who are starting to look at fecal transplants for mental health and obesity. And I really think that, we could have done a whole webinar on mental health and the microbiome, but I really think that in the future, that the microbiome is really going to change mental health completely, because we've seen, anybody who's in the call who's in practice, you've seen, you change somebody's diet and all of a sudden their depression lifts or their
Right.
anxiety lifts.
Right.
We just see it all the time. And so I think we're going to really see shifts over the next 10 years in that fecal transplant is going to be used for more and more different things. And I just anecdotally, I have a colleague and her son has Lyme disease
Mhm.
and adult son, and they found this friend's son. He grew up on a biodynamic farm. He's never had antibiotics. He's eaten organic his whole life. He's very, very healthy, and they did home fecal transplants. And when I last talked to her, they'd done 2 of them, and his Lyme was improving so dramatically. So, I think in the future, um, we're going to see a lot more usage for fecal
Yeah.
transplant.
I think so too. Just as a side, I don't want to mess things up here, but there's a number of questions, and I'm wondering if now that you're not running your slides, if you can go on webcam, or if we're risking losing you entirely by doing that.
We may, but
Don't
what
do
I
it then.
can, we may, we may.
Okay,
Give me
forget it.
like 5 minutes or something. Anyway,
Okay. No, don't do it.
okay.
But interesting, case study here with the Lyme's gentleman, and because the literature's also been out about healthy babies, and that's the best source because they're going to be the cleanest if the mother didn't take antibiotics while she was pregnant. Just a comment, but coming back to the C. diff woman, for as much as I know about fecal transplant and then studying the donor and that she had H. pylori, and so they gave her antibiotics. What were they thinking? They're going to use a transplant following antibiotics and thinking that was going to work. It just seems like a very big disconnect here.
It is a big disconnect to me, and honestly, I was at heard a fecal transplant researcher from Georgetown University a year or so ago speak, and he said, now what they're doing is they're screening donors just the same way they screen donors for other transplants.
Yeah.
And they're, being much more cautious, and it's not just a blender in the back room anymore.
Okay, good.
It's so
All
funny.
right.
I was at a conference and there was a vendor and he was selling fecal transplant equipment and he had a blender on the table.
Your own little wizard, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move past that a little bit. I'm going to take us back to fatty liver and
Okay.
question of whether there are specific medications that contribute to it.
There are, and I haven't really looked into that.
Okay.
I'm sure you
Okay.
can Google it with kind of no problem. But yeah, there are many medications that can contribute to it. I just don't know what they are.
Okay, thanks. What about testing for fatty liver? How would they go about that?
Testing for fatty liver is usually done with just a basic metabolic panel that you get from kind of annual screening. And so they're looking at liver enzymes,
Mhm.
um, GGT, SG. I can't remember all the names of them because they changed them on me.
Right.
But it's just a basic comprehensive panel, metabolic panel, and when they're testing your glucose and your creatinine and your phosphorus and calcium, this is something that they check. So really easy to look for.
Okay, great. And then how do you test or what test do you recommend to determine what bacteria is present in the gut, and how would you recommend to repopulate with beneficial bacteria to aid in losing weight and improving the immune system?
Okay, so we don't have that information yet. We
Okay.
just don't. Okay, and dysbiosis is, we all grew up with this model that there is like a pathogenic microbe, whether it's a virus or a parasite or a bacteria, and that makes us sick,
Mhm.
right? And when we started looking, for example, at stool, they did the same thing. They cultured. And now we know that most of what grows are just bullies. And so the things that we thought were the problem may not be the problem. And so it's one of those things where now they're starting to look at communities and they're saying this community is way out of balance.
Yes.
You know, and you may find that there's a specific microbe that needs to be treated, but in general, the movement is more towards, well, yeah, there are some diseases that you want to treat really specifically, but as far as dysbiosis is concerned, it's more general. So using something like berberine, which also helps balance the microbiome and helps lower cholesterol and is used as a diabetes drug. It's as useful as metformin. Might be a good herb to like try is using some berberine, which you can get from Oregon grapefruit or barberry or golden seal. But golden seal is going to cost you an arm and a leg, so I don't generally recommend it. And then again, you know, people didn't used to take probiotics. People used to eat food. And
Yes.
so I'd rather like try to do it with food.
Yeah. So are you suggesting for testing for gut bacteria that we don't go through the traditional testing we've been doing, like comprehensive stool and parasite testing?
I think it's useful to do the testing, but I also think that the pendulum is kind of swinging. That you're often, for those of us who are on the call who've done a lot of that testing, often you get the testing back, there's nothing there to work with. And like for one time I had a client and her doctor had run a stool test, and then she had ulcerative colitis and nothing showed up. And she happened to mention, you know, last winter I had bronchitis, and when my doctor gave me penicillin, my ulcerative colitis cleared up. I said, why don't you go back to your doctor and get some penicillin? You know, and she did, and it cleared up again. And so you know, it's like I think that stool testing can be really useful, but I think it's not for me, I'm not in practice anymore, but it wouldn't be my first line of thought right now. It would be like maybe a second line, unless somebody was having, you know, chronic diarrhea, or, you know, I think with stool testing, you're also looking at the balance of the microbiome, for example, with a GI effects or some of the other testing. You're looking at pancreatic sufficiency. You're looking for yeast overgrowth, which may or may not be found. You're looking at short chain fatty acids, and you're looking again at the balance. So I think they can be really useful, but unless you're not getting good clinical results just working with somebody, you may not feel a need to do one.
Got it.
It's also not really in our scope of practice.
No, but we do talk about it.
We do. We want to know how to read them and how to interpret them, for sure.
Yeah. So back to ketogenic diet. You talked about high-fat diet. Do you think ketogenic diet lends itself to endotoxemia?
I have not seen any research on that.
And do good fats also increase gut permeability potentially? This just relates to the endotoxicity slide you had.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to do what I always do in a moment like this. And I do this. I go right here and I go to PubMed.
Say, what does PubMed say?
And say, what does PubMed say? Because I love the question. And, you know, if we don't look right now, it might just slip right by us. Okay.
A moment in research, everybody. Inquiring mind was one to know immediately.
I do. So I just put in ketogenic diet and endotoxemia, and let's
so very specific search words.
Eucaloric ketogenic diet reduces hypoglycemia and inflammation in mice with endotoxemia. So it doesn't look like, at least in mice, from one study.
From one study, yeah.
From one study. So I think there needs to be a lot more that's looked at, but let's just kind of look. we look at just intestinal permeability, increased intestinal permeability, do we see anything that comes up? Nope, not really.
Okay. All right. There's your search words, people. Go at it. Bring it back to our next webinar. We'll talk about it. Okay. What about, you talked about green and black tea being probiotic, and they're wondering how it can be probiotic if you add boiled water to it. Wouldn't that kill the beneficial bacteria?
It does, but first of all, they're not in it that long. You're not boiling it. And second of all, from Japanese research, it really indicates that the dead probiotics still talk to our genes and have a immune supportive effect.
Yeah.
So don't throw out your old probiotics. Just
Right.
keep taking them.
Right, and if you refer to cultures that traditionally use green teas, they don't use boiled water. They use water that's not like 185 degrees, I think, and it's steeped for 3 minutes at the most, so that it's the most flavorful. Otherwise, it gets bitter. So maybe there's some of that influences it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, back on your probiotics for weight loss slide. Does your bullet point mean that L-acidophilus increases or decreases weight? Just not sure which way the arrow was referring to.
Acidophilus is one of the probiotics that helps reduce weight.
Yes.
And bifidobacteria too. But again, these are also preliminary, because how many of us, I mean, like I take probiotics every day and they don't help me lose weight.
Well, you don't know if you didn't take them, Liz.
Oh, I'd be 200 pounds by now. Oh my God.
That's what he said to me. He's like, I've been taking them for years. They don't work. And I said, well, you're at a pretty good weight. I don't know what it'd be like otherwise. Okay, let's look at the client that you presented about rheumatoid arthritis, because when we were talking about RA, this came up because they have a client with RA and they're doing live blood microscopy with her now, and her dark field analysis showed very advanced forms of microorganisms. It looks like a snow shower in there, and so she suggested that she get a CSAP test.
A CSA, a
Stool test.
A stool test.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it in that case. Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And I might also recommend, both Doctors Data and Genova have good stool tests, and
yes, they do.
And Doctors Data is really looking a lot at anaerobes these days. And anyway, that would be a great use of a stool test.
Okay. Yes, and with rheumatoid arthritis, we see this a lot, and the literature really supports it, of being, infection driven, and hence the inflammation and hence the pain, and then deterioration that starts to happening in the joints when it gets so chronic. Back to bypass surgery, which reduces the intake of foods. So do you think that fasting can also be a useful tool to help reducing leaky gut?
I do, and it's also, fasting has been used to balance the microbiome as well. So, for example, in a more traditional setting, like a hospital setting, somebody with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, they'll often put them on an elemental diet, which is basically fasting with some amino acids, fatty acids, a little bit of carbohydrate, and some vitamins and minerals. And they'll do that to bring down the inflammation and rebalance the gut microbiome so that healing can actually occur. The thing is that we can't fast forever.
No, we can't. And we're so happy to eat again.
I know, but yes, it can help, but there's probably also a tipping point where you're fasting and then your body starts seeing that as really stressful. So I've seen people who fast, a lot, and who were doing fasting using the maple syrup and cayenne
Oh
and
yeah.
lemon juice fast,
Yeah.
and there's no protein in there, and uh, I knew several people who they just lost so much of their muscle mass
Yes.
because they were doing this for 30 days at a time,
Right.
60 days at a
Yeah. The
time.
weight came down, but they didn't consider the muscle.
Yeah.
Just wait. Yeah. It's really sad, and it's hard to get back.
Mhm.
It
It is.
is. Well, I'm going to round this back to such an individual situation that needs to be considered. And we would talk about the healthy foods always. We have healthy food lists and our very general foods to avoid list. But then we get into things like people that are sensitive and have food intolerances and food sensitivities, and they may be reactive to salicylates or histamine. And then we have to adjust the game plan, accordingly for that. And so that's where the FODMAPs diet comes in, and carbohydrate sensitivity, the gamut of the various specialty diets that we have right now, including paleo and the autoimmune diet. The autoimmune protocol diet is very restrictive. It's the most restrictive of them all that I can think, but it can be very effective. And I think that coming back to a dietary trial like that is so revealing. We want to see it quantitated in our lab test, but it's just it's a thing of beauty when people adjust their diet and they feel differently. And you talked about that all through your presentation of suddenly they shifted what they were eating, and their whole profile and metabolism started shifting. So we have to be careful, we have to be mindful and pay attention to but not get locked into something. It's like people go on a low-fat diet and feel better, but then not after a while, but still are so adamant of staying with it, even though it's no longer serving them. So it's just my appeal to pay attention to yourselves, to who you're working with, not get fixed on one specific approach or perspective, but
Yeah. I
keep
mean,
it fluid.
Paula, you said that so beautifully. It's we do see that people get stuck in a certain place, and all of these diets are really therapeutic diets. They're meant to get us out of a hole that we're in, and the whole idea is eventually to be able to eat pretty normally. It's not to keep eating this same way, or and we teach life cycle nutrition, and the reason why we teach life cycle nutrition is because nutritional needs change. So when I was younger, I ate a mostly vegetarian diet, and one day, made for 20 years, and one day I ate a piece of chicken um, in my 40s, and my body just was like, hallelujah, it's about time. So I've seen it firsthand in my own body
Mhm.
where at various times my body screams at me for different types of dietary approach.
Yes.
And we know that two-thirds or more of the immune system is in the gut. We also know that every day we eat pounds of food that our immune system has to deal with. And most of it's inflammatory if we're just eating a standard Western diet. So
Mhm.
we see just kind of cleaning up. I know at Hawthorn there's like a sugar-free assignment, and it's amazing just doing that one thing in people's lives. What can happen in someone's life just from going sugar-free for 2 weeks?
Yes. Yes. And oh, you bring us back to curriculum that used to be.
Oh, it's not
But I
there
love
anymore.
I love it that you
Okay,
remember those assignments. It's a good one.
it was a
Yes, things
Paula assignment.
it
I know
was.
those.
Yes, it was. And things aren't static here either, and that's a good thing. But um one back thing, just a follow-up on discussion you and I were just having about different diets, and she's referring to the elemental diet and wondering if there's a way we can use that with our clients, perhaps fasting from dinner to lunch the next day or even longer. So I think that really refers to intermittent fasting that's become quite popular. So the question is, would you recommend nutrient supplementation with this type of fasting?
Well, first of all, there's like Peptamen, and there are kind of Nestle's and big company made products that can uh, uh, be used for an elemental diet. They don't taste good.
Mhm.
And so people aren't really that eager to do it. And then there are products from all of our, supplement companies that are used sometimes for weight loss or just
Mhm.
protein powders that have vitamins
Medical
and
food.
minerals. Yeah, medical foods, and those can also be used. Um, and, intermittent fasting, we have a lot of good research on the immune system, diabetes, obesity, um, and all kinds of risks. So intermittent fasting, having people fast, 12 hours a day or longer could be very beneficial also.
Mhm. Mhm. Great. Thank you for this. Thank you for expertise on this. I hope you'll come back and do a mental health and microbiome presentation next.
That would be
Maybe we'll
fun.
just have a year-long microbiome series because, like you said, there's a lot that can be said on it.
There is a lot. It's
It's
been really
always
fun to be here with all of you, and always fun to be with my friend Paula.
great. There's great appreciation here for for hearing your voice, for this presentation, for the information. A lot of gratitude that the slides will be available afterwards since the information was dense and nonstop. So thank you for this, Liz. It's really been a pleasure to have you back in the Hawthorn Garden and sharing your abundance with us.
Thank you.
You bet. I've got a couple closing comments, everybody, and then we'll wrap this up. A reminder that it was recorded, this webinar, and it'll be available on our website under archived webinars in just a few days. And if you're interested in the courses and programs that Hawthorn has to offer, please check out our website for complete information. And if you want more personalized attention, Kathy McDermott's our Director of Admissions and available to talk at any time. Reminder about the survey to fill out after the webinar ends and how much that helps us. And an invitation for you to join us for our next webinar on Tuesday, June 6th, that's led by Karen Roselle. She's an author and 17-year marketing coach and trainer, and she's the developer of the Happy Little Practice method. Karen's focus is going to be small practice, big results, 5 essential shifts to create a great full-time income in about 24 hours per week. This is for us specifically, nutrition professionals, coaches, and consultants. So I'm going to switch our focus a lot into the latter part of this year, doing more business and legal webinar topics to serve our needs in that way too. So check out Karen. She's fabulous in what she has to offer and has a lot of tools here that'll support us in running our practices and building our businesses. So thanks everybody for joining me. This does conclude today's presentation. Thanks again, Dr. Lipski. Really a pleasure to have you back and sharing with everybody this educational experience. I just really love it that you walked in the door again, Liz.
Me too. Thank you.
You bet. I wish everybody the best of health. I look forward to learning more together in our webinar series and our All About Alumni series too. And yeah, remember that practice loving kindness and compassion thing I bring up from time to time? I'm still doing it and I'm encouraging you to. Thanks for that. See you later, everybody.